This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. We're going to be talking about humour. And before we go any further, before I even take the risk of introducing you and introducing me, I want to introduce a point about this presentation, this address, this podcast. And that is, it's incredibly important. It applies to us individually. It applies to us in a community. It applies to us organizationally. There is not one part of the human trail to which this doesn't apply. And it is the subject of humor. And the reason I'm giving us this little send up in the beginning is because this is a message that needs to go to all our political leaders. It needs to go to our corporate leaders. It needs to go to our supervisors. It needs to get very, very broad distribution. And this is, I'm throwing down the gauntlet a bit, but we need to have this message out there for people to hear. And I want to add one other thing, Sarah, that you and I have talked about many a time, and that is the presentation that you and I make is the same one that we make when we're doing public presentations, public speeches, workshops, and the equivalent. So if listeners want a workshop or if they want to have a follow-up on this, then it's get hold of Jeremy at respectonomics.com. That's how important this message is. Now, with that preface, I will now be a little more, polite and say, this is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics, and I'm joined with my co-host, Sarah Benton. And we always say democratically, meaning wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening, however you're listening, the answer is to say hello and to greet you accordingly, which is what we do. And I'll say the same to Sarah. Greetings, Sarah.
Greetings, Jeremy. Good day, everyone.
Thank you. Now, before we get into the subject of humor, is there anything you want to say about it? Anything you want that springs to mind? And I don't mean you have to be funny or witty or anything like that, but just if there's something that, if you say, yeah, I like humor, or if you say, I don't like humor, do you have any particular opinion about humor?
I do. First of all, I think I could probably be a stand-up comedian. I'm just going to toss that out there.
All right.
Maybe I was in a former life. I think humor is used for many different reasons. In my personal opinion, I probably tend to use humor in order to help navigate through difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
Or challenging situations. So sometimes, if you can infuse humor of some sort in order to either A, help lighten a situation, or B, just to, provide a smile to somebody's face going through a challenging situation or supporting a situation. I can say I think I'll often attempt to see if humor can be, of course, tactfully placed, obviously never at the expense of anybody else, but in the appropriate time setting in place, right? And I love humor because I love to laugh. So even though you might be going through some challenging times, and I know there's many people out there that they will not show the world that they're going through some challenging times. You would never know behind the scenes or what's going on behind the scenes. However, humor can make things feel better, or it's a reprieve, maybe is the better word. So I enjoy laughing. So no matter what the situation, if you're going through challenging times, it's okay to take a moment to allow somebody to put a smile on your face and for some humor. I personally, not for everybody. However, I do find that helps me.
What I find interesting, Sarah, is from a dead halt, and you never knew I was going to ask you this question about what do you think about humor and how do you respond to it. And you've become very eloquent. You've become very concise. You've explained exactly what it means to you. And I think in itself, that's a very interesting revelation, because I think most people would in fact agree with you. I think most people would look at humor and say, give it to me. I like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's never poking, like obviously, there's very challenging situations where humor is not welcomed or not appropriate. So it's about knowing the circumstances and knowing the positioning and things like that. So
Right.
obviously, I want to make sure
Okay.
that I'm clarifying that never in a circumstance where you're
Oh,
diminishing anything, right?
no, no, no. I mean, you would never diminish me, would you? Ever?
No, never.
No,
But it's a
nobody
tool
would.
and it's a resource, and if it works for that person,
Yeah.
then
Do you
there you
know something? I'm not sure I should admit this on air, but
go.
I was
How funny
in.
I am.
No, this goes another route altogether. No,
Yes.
this deals with. Yes, I was a in a community show, a community pageant, I suppose you'd call it, and I had the role of King Herod. And I
Excellent.
said, yes, well, I said to the producer, I said, how come you got chose me to be King Herod? And she said, because I needed somebody who was pompous and arrogant.
And she said
Well,
that with a smile.
well, of course, I took it as a huge compliment. I thought it
Right.
was hilarious. And really, I mean, it was very funny. But you know what? Seriously, she nailed it. It was
Mhm.
funny and it wasn't said in a derogatory way. It
No,
wasn't,
and I think you need to know your audience.
yeah,
And again, like I say,
exactly.
understand and know the
Yeah,
circumstances,
yeah, yeah.
right? That's
But
that empathy and
but it was funny.
compassion
But I'm going
piece.
to say before I get to meat and potatoes of humor,
Mm,
I want to make one other comment, and that
yes,
is it's worth every nickel to be able to have a good laugh at oneself. When
absolutely. I do that very often.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know you do. And when the producer said you're pompous and arrogant, I mean, truthfully, I took that as a compliment,
Right.
which is tragic, really. But anyway, let's move on a little bit, please. And I want to, when the subject of humor came up, it came up almost for a negative reason. And by that I mean, if you look across the world today, where people work, how they interact in their communities, and so on, just across the board, there are a few things you notice. One of them is a certain dullness, where
Mm,
people are not actually smiling a great deal. And when you raise that, you often get an answer like, well, what is there to smile at these days? Which has a certain truth to it. The world
mhm,
is full of nasty thorns and nasty issues, great anger, great abuse, and so on. Then we think about depression. And there is, and I think you made this point a moment ago when you said your humor has to be aligned with the state of that individual.
mm,
And one of the difficulties with humor these days is if in fact one is in a state of depression, whether it's clinical, therapeutic, circumstantial, whatever, if you're in a state of depression, humor can actually drive you down a peg even again.
mhm.
So
Yes.
there's depression. I'm going to just
Which was
run
the
these.
point of me saying, make sure that you're
Yeah,
understanding the circumstance. There's a time
right.
and there's a place, right?
Absolutely. Then there's another issue that I've noticed, and that is that when people have their heads down, when they are dealing with this sense of dullness or depression, they also lose that sense of curiosity.
Mhm.
They lose that sort of, gosh, I wonder what's underneath that or what that's about, or get into that sense of exploration. I find it interesting. The respectonomics is based on the compass of life. And the compass, of course, requires you to look up to see where you're going. Well, if you don't have the compass in your hand, you're not going to find out where you're going for a start. But if you
Right,
don't feel like looking to see where you're going, that is akin to a lack of curiosity. And
right.
I think we see that. We see a lack of camaraderie. And what I mean by that is how many organizations do you see where what in fact you see is that I think it's called the silo protocol, where
Mm,
people build silos around themselves.
mhm,
So they're not engaging with others.
mhm,
We see a lack of awareness. One of the things that I find fascinating with respectonomics is how often you and I will say, this is something we look at. And there's almost this startled look that says, wow, I never thought of that. And what you really want to say back is, but it's staring at us in the face. In other
right.
words, when you don't have awareness, it doesn't really matter how proverbially obvious something is. If you ain't aware, you don't see it.
Mhm.
That's it.
Or have
I
the
mean,
ability or the capacity to be
yeah.
aware.
Yeah, I mean, look at children. How many children? No, how many husbands? Let's be very realistic. How many husbands leave dirty shoes in the hallway in the way of other people? I've never done that. Ever, 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 ever.
Oh. Okay.
I don't think I'm getting agreement. But anyway, there's another thing that's happening, Sarah, that I think we have to be, it's extraordinary. And we all know that mental health has become a clarion call. Again, it's under the heading of awareness, but we have
Right.
become very aware of mental illness, mental sickness, mental weaknesses, or whatever you want to call them. The point I'm getting at is there's a sense almost developing where if you don't have a mental issue, you haven't really joined the crowd. So you
Mm,
almost get this sense of people looking to find out why they don't feel mentally something or other. Let's just say at odds, don't feel that because they don't feel part of the crowd. And I think we
mm,
need to be very aware of the fact that yes, there's mental illnesses, but there's also mental health.
mhm.
And if your mental health is in good shape, you know, all blessings to you. I think that's wonderful. And we should be, I don't mean proud in an arrogant way, but very grateful to have that mental perspicacity, mental acuity, the ability to look at things in a bright light.
Mm.
So, all I'm pointing to is mental sickness doesn't have to apply to everybody, and mental health is um, it's a wonderful goal. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And it's important to call out, that I think there's been advancements, or again, is it about awareness in terms of the
Mm.
tools and the resources that
Yeah.
are there, and also people not feeling so, I don't know if ostracized is the right word, that if you are navigating or dealing with
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
it's become more acceptable
Right.
for people to
Yeah.
identify or call out,
Yeah.
and that's important, right?
Yeah. I think, Sarah, to interrupt you, I think the acceptability of the mental health issue must also be careful that we don't become almost entitled to feel that way. In other words, there has to be a certain degree of, my mental health is good, or I am going to take steps personally to deal with it. The responsibility of self, in other words. I think
Mhm.
that just needs to be on the table. Respectonomics does not have all the answers. Let's be very clear.
No, we're not medical professionals
No,
and we're
no,
not
no, no,
psychologists or,
no,
or
no.
therapists. So that's important to call out.
We are human beings.
Yeah, it's about drawing attention,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
To
So I'm going
topics.
to draw attention now, and I want the corporate CEO and the like to be listening very carefully to this because every corporation deals with costs. As a matter of fact, some corporations say that their primary motivation is to control their costs. And when you look at a cost, generally speaking, what you're looking for is a cost of production, a cost of providing a service, and you try and make sure those costs are reasonable and accommodated and all that. But there's a cost here that we need to talk about, a cost that in fact impedes productivity, it impedes service to customers. It is an obstacle and it is a totally unhelpful cost. And the costs I'm talking about is when you have this absence of humor. So just take that as the situation. You've got a
Okay.
group of people and there's no humor. What in fact are you looking at? And what you typically look at is you look at fear. People are frightened. They're nervous about their jobs, nervous about the future, nervous about their families, and so on. But you get
Hmm.
fear. You get
Okay.
inertia, that feeling that I just can't do anything. And you get that sort of almost sense, well, it's a paralysis, really, but you have that sense of inertia. Then you have what we've already talked about, the silo syndrome, where people just draw into themselves and don't share, they don't participate, they lose that essence of being communal human beings. And then the last one is, and this is in a business sense and a government sense, actually everywhere, is a risk of bloat because bloat becomes very attractive to build up your own protection, your own sort of sense of circle, your own orbit in order to protect yourself. And of
Hmm.
course, that bloat is, by definition, it's unproductive. and it increases all kinds of issues, regulations and obstacles, and just not getting the job done. So, what I'm pointing to is, and I want the CEO, and I say CEO, I use that in a generic sense, that someone who's in charge, someone who's a leader, whether it's business, corporate, community centric, whatever that leadership is, listen carefully because when humor, the humor is out of the mix, the costs are fantastic and they're very expensive and they hurt people a lot. They're very damaging. So,
Right.
what I'm getting at, Sarah, is I think we need to be, and I hope that the leaders will join me on this. We need to get back into the business of putting humor into the mix. Now, as you know, I tend to draw attention to people's thinkings and whatever through a process of metaphors or object lessons. And the one I'm using, the one I'm using today is the flat tire. Because if you go up to your car and you see that it's got a flat tire, I know two things. One is your heart sinks and you go,
Hmm.
oh no. And then it becomes, amongst other things, incredibly inconvenient. And a flat tire, even the word flat, is actually quite applicable because when you say somebody is flat, it's a very quick way of saying they don't have any humor. They're just flat. And
Right.
when we have a flat tire, what we're saying is the air has come out of it and it doesn't function well. Now, if you've got a flat tire, and I think we've all had them. Have you ever gone to the parking lot or you're somewhere and found a flat tire on your car?
On many occasions.
Okay, well, okay, then you'll know what I'm about to say. But let's explore this a little further with one another. Because if you have a flat tire and you're going to fix it, I guarantee you the first thing you have to do is to stop the car. You cannot fix the tire while it's moving. I don't know if you know that,
It
but it
has
has.
been known that it needs to be stationary.
It needs,
Sometimes you can't move while you're even
yeah,
attempting to, right?
yeah, exactly. So let's put this into our human context. We need to stop. Do you know something? A lot of us have a great deal of difficulty stopping. The world is pushing, pushing, pushing. I've had that experience, perhaps you have too, when you're sitting and just reflecting on the world. You're meditating, whatever word you like to use, but you're just in a stationary period of just looking to yourself, really. Have you noticed how people will come up to you and say things like, "What are you doing?"
Mm,
And it's
mhm.
said in a, frankly, it is said in a, I'll say aggressive, but it is said in a confrontational way because it goes with, you ought to be doing something.
Hmm.
And I think one of the finest messages we can give one to another, humanly speaking, is please feel free to stop
Right.
to fix the tire. So the first thing we're going to do is agree on stopping. And stopping is, amongst other things, it's very physical. We've talked about that. It's mental, excuse me, and it's also spiritual. So it allows the fullness of our humanity to stop. I've heard a statistic recently, a terrifying one, really, and I think it came from the New York Times. And that is that the human brain today, on an average person, is working 32 hours in a 24-hour period.
Mm,
And if you think about it, our grandparents never multitasked.
right.
They went and dug the potatoes up, they came in, they washed their hands. Everything was done in a compartmentalized, singular sense. And yet today we think it's very clever and we take it as a badge of honor to say, I can do three things at the same time.
Right.
I can
Right.
polish my shoes and listen to my phone messages at the same time. So
Hmm.
we are overworking. So this business of stopping, first of all, is essential. The next thing we need to do is to understand that humor is a verb. It's a motion. It's an engagement. So that if I'm going to have humor, then it is part of my living experience. But just keeping the humor to myself isn't good enough. The humor has to be one of exchange or the one of engagement. Your late uncle was very, very big on explaining how to build relationships.
Hmm.
And in a sense, When you have humor, it's almost an equation. You build relationships, the humor flows into it. If you have humor, you will build relationships. The two are synchronistic, they go together beautifully. But your Uncle Derek, he always said the first thing you do when you meet somebody, and everybody should try this, you're standing at the bus stop, you're standing at the checkout counter at the grocery store, wherever you are, that brilliant question, and you turn to another human being, and all you say and all you ask is, how is your day going? And I'm just utterly amazed at the answers I get. Now, one of the things that amazes me about this, how is your day going, is this is really interesting. 9 out of 10 people, when I ask that question, they'll come back with a smile and they
Hmm.
come back with something that's elevating, that something's really good. You know, they've had a great day at the hockey arena or something, but they say something. And the reason that question's so important is not only are you acknowledging the human being, but you're doing something else. In fact, am giving that person the opportunity to reflect on the good things in life.
Mm.
Because, as I say, 9 out of 10 people come back with an answer that you would commonly call positive. So,
Right.
the first question is, how is your day going? I know you believe in that. I don't know if you
Yes.
want to add to it, but how is your day going? I might even ask you, Sarah, how is your day going?
Fantastic. Look what we're
Uh-huh.
doing. We have
Yeah,
the opportunity
yeah,
to
yeah,
share.
yeah. So it's a lovely question. The second thing is there's three parts to it. So how's your day going? And it's almost like climbing a ladder because the next thing you do is again at the bus stop and or where there's a crowd, you might be waiting to get into the hockey game. And as you're looking around, you turn to somebody who's there. Now, it could in fact be your spouse or your child or relation, a good friend, could be. But it's fascinating to do this to people who are just standing there that you've never met before. And I will do this with you now. I think that's a really beautiful sweater you're wearing.
Why, thank you.
See? It's complimentary. It's not forward in a sort of aggressive kind of way. It is just recognizing that somebody who's made an effort to put on or do
Mm.
something, you're just recognizing it. It might be the earrings, it might be the sweater, it might be the new glasses, it might be a new hairstyle. But what you can do is just by looking at somebody and saying, "My, that's a beautiful brooch," or "That's a beautiful set of cufflinks." Anything that recognizes the physicality of what somebody has is extremely uplifting. So, how's
Right.
your day going? That's the first one. The second one is giving a compliment. Now, the third one is more, I'm going to say, intensely personal. And I don't think, well, in fact, you can't do this with everybody. But we said a moment ago, this is a graduating thing. How's your day going? You've got a beautiful sweater. The third one is this: you make a difference to my life.
Mm.
And we don't say that very often. Do you know, I've never heard a chief executive officer, chair of the board, coming up to me, because I can use this personally, and saying, you make a difference in my life. I've never heard it. And it's a very powerful statement. And I actually, and I think I can say this on air, I said it to you yesterday. You make a difference. You've made a huge difference to Respectonomics. You've brought it alive. You mean a lot to me. You mean a
Thank you.
lot to our listeners. So I think recognizing and keeping your eye out on those people that mean something to you to say so. How many times do you go to I'm going to say a funeral or a celebration of life, and you go there and you hear all these things being said, and how often do we say to ourselves afterwards, should have said it when the person was around?
Hmm.
It's very much akin to that. So it's looking to see at people who make a difference in our lives. You make a difference to me, say so. It's part of excellent humor. And it's engaging. Humor requires engagement. I've got one funny thing to tell you. In medieval times,
Hmm.
and you had this gluttonous banquet where everybody was eating and meals and drink and goblets were flying around. Do you remember what happened at the end of the meal? In came the court jester.
Mm,
and he made everybody laugh. And you were talking about this earlier about making people laugh.
mhm.
Laugh is a fabulous tonic and it's brilliant for the system. So when you've had that proverbial big meal and overstuffed and all those things we shouldn't do, having a good laugh is very healthy. And if you're overstuffed with life, a good laugh is a good tonic. It's a good remedy. Agreed?
Excellent. Agreed.
Okay. Then I want to talk about something else here. If your tire needs reflating, and we've all talked about, we stopped the car and we're going to reflate it, yes?
Yes.
I've got a question. What do you reflate the tire with? A few years ago, the tire industry, the automotive industry, suddenly became very big on using nitrogen to reflate your tire. And I can't remember all the reasons. It seems to have disappeared now. But what do we do to reflate the tire of the human being? And there's one word, and I've thought about this. I've thought about mind and body and spirit and soul and all these big words we use. But what is it that I can do to reflate your tire? And it's dignity.
Mm,
When I dignify you, I reflate your tire. And then becomes the great opportunity for engagement, the idea of motion, the idea of humor, and the idea of being able to share with one another. All for the sake of, if you will, dignifying. So dignity is the air we're going to put back into these flat tires. Now, I just want to say lastly, one other thing about this. There are two risks with fixing a tire. One of them is overinflating it. And overinflating goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Sarah. You know, when you said you want to be attentive to your audience or to your
mhm.
listener, and you don't
Or
want to be,
circumstance. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you don't want to be terribly funny when something around that
Right.
individual is
There's
not.
a time and there's a place.
Time and a place. And overinflating is when we overinflate. And you see it in the form of ego, you see it in the form of, you know, people trying to take control and so on. If you overinflate the tire, you run the risk of it's a very rough ride, if you've ever done it. And
Hmm.
on top of that, the tread on the tire does not wear evenly. It is not a good way to run one's life or business. So overinflating is something to avoid. And by the way, I should add one other thing. If you've got humor and you're not using it, that's the sort of the counterpoint to overinflating. If you've got humor and you're not using it, I have a horrible feeling that humor turns into a tumor.
Mm,
It sticks around in you and it doesn't have a natural outage. So don't overinflate, but let your humor go around. Let other people hear it and enjoy it. Now, lastly, very lastly, sometimes you look at your tire and you find out there's a nail in it. And I've come to
yes.
one conclusion. All of us, in our human being, our human entity, we all have nails in our tires. And they're nails that we wish weren't there. And they're nails we try and pull out. And sometimes we have to get someone else to help us to pull them out. But you know what I want to emphasize is everybody has a nail in their tire. And why that's so important is when we look at somebody else's life, you said earlier, Sarah, you said about not knowing what people's lives are like and what's really going on. Well, we've all got nails in our tires. Sometimes they're in the sidewalls, sometimes they're in the rim, sometimes they're in the main, in the inner tube. But wherever that nail is, why this is so important to be empathetic to that is because when you go onto one of these sites like a Facebook, what do you see? Smiling, happy faces. Everything's okay in Mississippi. And the truth of the matter is, no, it's not.
Mm,
Everybody's got a nail, and it's really worth understanding that there's a nail in everybody's life. So when we apply good humor, what we're doing is to help the leak around that nail and to help people to be able to put their wheel of life into motion and to produce a great benefit to other people. Humor wins the day.
absolutely.
Yeah?
And you.
I rest my case.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah.